Hi. I think it's already live. You can start talking.
Hello, welcome to Levity Storytelling. How are you doing today? Hello, welcome to Levity Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading the Bible. We have it right here. And then we are going to be reading Ben-Hur. Yep. And Tim will give you the synopsis to Ben-Hur last night.
Well, actually 2 nights ago.
And you might be thinking, how's a little kid going to read this book? Well, I'm not. Heavy D is.
Who's Heavy D?
My dad.
Oh, okay. Hi, so I'm Heavy D. So that was a college nickname, and it's a long story. So, yeah, I was skin and bones in college, so I'm not quite skin and bones anymore. All right, so we were reading the book of Judges. So that is where we will continue. We are on chapter 12. Jephthah's conflict with Ephraim. And here we go. This is the English Standard Version, Judges chapter 12. The men of Ephraim were called to arms, and they crossed to Zephon and said to Jephthah, "Why did you cross over to fight against the Ammonites and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house over you with fire." And Jephthah said to them, "I and my people had a great dispute with the Ammonites, and when I called you, you did not save me from their hand. And when I saw that you would not save me, I took my life in my hand and crossed over against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me?" Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead struck Ephraim because they said, "You are fugitives of Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and Manasseh." And the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me go over," the men of Gilead said to them, "Are you an Ephraimite?" When he said no, they said to him, "Then say Shibboleth." And he said Shibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Oh, he said Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth. Ooh. Because he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him and slaughtered him as the fords of the Jordan. At the time, 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in the city of Gilead. After him, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He gave in marriage outside his clan, and 30 daughters he brought in from outside for his sons. And he judged Israel 7 years. Then Ibzan died and was buried at Bethlehem. After him, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. Then Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried at Ajalon in the land of Zebulun. After him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, judged Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried at Pirathon in the land of Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. Excuse me. That's the end of that. That's kind of a transitional chapter into what's coming up next, which is the story of Samson, which we will cover over, it's at least 4 chapters. It's at least 4 chapters. Yeah, 4 chapters. So something that I would like to say about the book Ben-Hur, because I just finished, today I turned in my last paper for my master's class that I'm working on, and this class was historical, history of Christian theology is basically what it was. And Ben-Hur fits into the historical Christian narrative in the fact that it is a historical fiction from the time of Jesus. Now, that's significant because when was this written? This was written in the later 1800s. So 1870, I think, is when it was published. So the significance of that, what was going on in the 1800s that hadn't ever happened before? Well, there were these people called archaeologists that went around and they actually were finding all these biblical uh, confirmations in the archaeological record that they could not only confirm things, but they could find the details about things. And so you see a very detailed account of a lot of the things that are going on in this book. Well, this is because for the first time in history, people actually knew, well, I mean, I guess they knew during the actual Roman Empire, but people didn't really care then. But in the 1800s, people actually did care. And so for the first time, they were able to publish this kind of stuff in a manner that people would be interested in it. And of course, you have to remember, they didn't have epic cinema at the time. All they had was epic books. So Ben-Hur was the realization of the biblical archaeology in the 1800s. So I hope that you're enjoying this book. I really enjoy it, and it's one of my favorites. There's the plot is going to get pretty intense very quickly in the next couple of chapters and books. So that's just my little 2 cents that I wanted to put out. Now Kimberly has been very patiently waiting to give this synopsis. So here she is. I'm going to go ahead and get up and let you.
So what happened in the last 2 chapters was basically a ton of details about the galley. And the captain liked this one guy who seemed pretty strong.
Who was the captain?
Captain, I forget his name.
He wasn't actually the captain. He was somebody, I don't know, but his name was Arrius.
This guy named Arrius liked this person who seemed really strong.
But it's not the Arrius from the 4th century that was a heretic in the church. He was a Roman.
And so basically then he saw this guy who looked really strong and he's like, oh hey, this guy looks really strong. And like at the time in Rome, being strong was like the best thing you could be besides king. I mean, yeah. And so he was like, maybe I should talk to this guy or something like that. I don't know. But there was like a ton, like tons and tons and tons of details. That's basically all that happened.
Okay. So as I said, the details are what is important here, because for the first time in history, they actually had the details. So with all of that said, we can now begin chapter 3. This is called Arrius and Ben-Hur on Deck. JJ, where'd you go? Are you in your room? Okay. The 4th day out, and the Astroe, so the galley was named, Astroe. I didn't name it. I don't know. Speeding through the Ionian Sea, the sky was clear and the wind blew as if bearing the goodwill of all the gods. As it was possible to overtake the fleet before reaching the bay east of the island of Cythera, designated for assemblage, Arrius, somewhat impatient, spent much time on deck. He took note diligently of matters pertaining to his ship, and as a rule was well pleased. In the cabin, swinging in the great chair, his thoughts continually reverted to the rower on number 60. Knowest thou the man just come from your bench? From yon bench, he said. He asked he at length asked of the orator. A relief was going on at that moment. From number 60, returned the chief. Yes. The chief looked sharply at the rower, then going forward. As thou knowest, he replied, the ship is but a month from the marker's hand, and the men are as new to me as the ship. He is a Jew, Arrius remarked thoughtfully. The noble Quintus is shrewd. He is very young, Arrius continued. But our best rower, said the other, I have seen his oar bend almost to breaking. Of what disposition is he? He is obedient. Further, I know not. Once he made request of me. For what? He wished me to change him alternately from the right to the left. Did he give a reason? He had observed that the men who are confined to one side became misshapen. He also said that some day of storm or battle there might be sudden need to change him, and he might then be unserviceable. Purple, the idea is new. What else hast thou observed of him? He is cleanly above his companions. In that he is Roman, said Arrius approvingly. Have you nothing of his history? Not a word. The tribune reflected a while and turned to go to his own seat. If I should be on deck when his time is up, he paused to say, send him to me. Let him come alone. About 2 hours later, Arrius stood under the upholstery of the galley, in the mood of one who, seeing himself carried swiftly towards an event of mighty import, has nothing to do but wait. The mood in which philosophy vests an even-minded man with the utmost calm and is ever so serviceable. The pilot sat with a hand upon the rope by which the rudder paddles, one on each side of the vessel, were managed. In the shade of the sail, some sailors lay asleep, and up on the yard there was a lookout. Lifting his eyes from the solarium set under the upholstery for reference in keeping the course, Arrius beheld the rower approaching. The chief called thee, the noble Arrius, and said it was thy will that I should seek thee here. I have come. Arrius surveyed the figure, tall, sinewy, glistening in the sun, and tinted by the rich red blood within, surveyed it admiringly, and with a thought of the arena. Yet the manner was not without effect upon him. There was in the voice a suggestion of life, at least partly spent under refining influences. The eyes were clear and open, and more curious than defiant. To the shrewd, demanding, masterful glance bent upon it, the face gave back nothing to mar its youthful comeliness, nothing of accusation or sullenness or menace, only the signs which a great sorrow long born imprints as time mellows the surface of pictures. In tacit acknowledgment of the effect, the Roman spoke as an older man to a younger, not as a master to a slave. The orator tells thou art his best rower. The orator is very kind, the rower answered. Hast thou seen much service? About 3 years. At the oars? I cannot recall a day of the rest of them. The labor is hard. Few men can bear it a year without breaking, and thou art but a boy. The noble Arrius forgets that the spirit hath much to do with endurance. By its help the weak sometimes thrive when the strong perish. From thy speech thou art a Jew. My ancestors, further back than the first Romans, were Hebrews. The stubborn pride of thy race is not lost in thee, said Arrius, observing a flush upon the rower's face. Pride is never so loud as when in chains. What cause hast thou for pride? That I am a Jew. Arrius smiled. I have not been to Jerusalem, he said, but I have heard of its princes. I knew one of them. He was a merchant and sailed the seas. He was fit to have been a king. Of what degree art thou? I must answer thee from the bench of a galley. I am of the degree of slaves. My father was a prince of Jerusalem, and as a merchant he sailed the seas. He was known and honored in the guest chamber of the great Augustus. His name? Ithamar, of the house of Hur. The tribune raised his hand in astonishment. A son of Hur? Thou? After a silence he asked, What brought thee here? Judah lowered his head, and his breast labored hard. When his feelings were sufficiently mastered, he looked the tribune in the face and answered, I was accused of attempting to assassinate Valerius Gratus, the procurator. Thou? Cried Arrius, yet more amazed and retreating a step. Thou, that assassin? All Rome rang with the story. It came to my ship in the river by Lodinium. The two regarded each other silently. I thought the family of Hur blotted from the earth, said Arrius, speaking first. A flood of tender recollections carried the young man's pride away. Tears shone upon his cheeks. Mother, mother, and my little Tirzah, where are they, O tribune, noble tribune, if thou knowest anything of them? He clasped his hands in appeal. Tell me all thou knowest. Tell me if they are living. If living, where are they, and in what condition? Oh, I pray thee, tell me. He drew nearer Arrius, so near that his hands touched the cloak where it dropped from the latter's folded arms. The horrible day is 3 years gone, he continued. 3 years, O tribune, and every hour a whole lifetime of misery, a lifetime in a bottomless pit with death and no relief but in labor. And in all that time, not a word from anyone, not a whisper. Oh, if in being forgotten we could only forget. If only I could hide from that scene, my sister torn from me, my mother's last look. I have felt the plague's breath and the shock of ships in battle. I have heard the tempest lashing the sea and laughed, though others prayed. Death would have been a riddance. Bend the oar, yes, in the strain of mighty effort, trying to escape the haunting of what that day occurred. Think what little will help me. Tell me they are dead, if no more, for happy they cannot be, while I am lost. I have heard them call me in the night. I have seen them on the water walking. Oh, never anything so true as my mother's love. And Tirzah, her breath was as the breath of white lilies. She was the youngest branch of the palm, so fresh, so tender, so graceful, so beautiful. She made my day all morning. She came and went in music, and mine was the hand that laid them low. Dost thou admit thy guilt? Asked Arrius sternly. The change that came upon Ben-Hur was wonderful to see. It was so instant and extreme. The voice sharpened, the hands arose tight clenched, every fiber thrilled, his eyes inflamed. Thou hast heard of the God of my fathers, he said, of the infinite Jehovah. By his truth and almightiness, and by the love with which he hath followed Israel from the beginning, I swear I am innocent. The tribune was much moved. O noble Roman, continued Ben-Hur, give me a little faith, and into my darkness, deeper darkening every day, send a light. Arrius turned away and walked the deck. Didst thou not have a trial? He asked, stopping suddenly. No! The Roman raised his head, surprised. No trial? No witnesses? Who passed judgment upon thee? Romans, it should be remembered, were at no time such lovers of the law and its forms as in the ages of their decay. They bound me with cords and dragged me to a vault in the tower. I saw no one. No one spoke to me. Next day, soldiers took me to the seaside. I have been a galley slave ever since. What couldst thou have proven? I was a boy, too young to be a conspirator. Gratus was a stranger to me. If I had meant to kill him, that was not the time or the place. He was riding in the midst of a legion, and it was broad day. I could not have escaped. I was of a class most friendly to Rome. My father had been distinguished for his services to the emperor. We had a great estate to lose. Ruin was certain to myself, my mother, my sister. I had no cause for malice, while every consideration, property, family, life, conscience, the law, to a son of Israel was as the breath of his nostrils, would have stayed my hand, though the foul intent had been ever so strong. I was not mad. Death was preferable to shame, and believe me, I pray it is so yet. Who was with thee when the blow was struck? I was on the housetop, my father's house. Tirzah was with me at my side, the soul of gentleness. Together we leaned over the parapet to see the legion pass. A tile gave way under my hand and fell upon Gratus. I thought I had killed him. Ah, what horror I felt! Where was thy mother? In the chamber below. What became of her? Ben-Hur clenched his hands and drew a breath like a gasp. I do not know. I saw them drag her away. That is all I know. Out of the house they drove every living thing, even the dumb cattle, and they sealed the gates. The purpose was that she should not return. I too asked for her. Oh, for one word. She at least was innocent. I can forgive. But I pray thy pardon, noble tribune. A slave like me should not talk of forgiveness or of revenge. I am bound to an oar for life. Arrius listened intently. He brought all his experience with slaves to his aid. If the feelings shown in this instance were assumed, the acting was perfect. On the other hand, if it were real, the Jew's innocence might not be doubted. And if he were innocent, with what blind fury the power had been exercised, a whole family blotted out to atone an accident. The thought shocked him. There is no wiser providence than that of our occupations, however rude or bloody, cannot wear out morally. That such qualities as justice and mercy, if they really possess us, continue to live on under them, like flowers under the snow. The tribune could be inexorable, else he had not been fit for the usages of his calling. He could also be just, and to excite his sense of wrong was to put him in the way to right the wrong. The crews of the ships in which he served came after a time to speak of him as the good tribune. Shrewd readers will not want a better definition of his character. In this instance, there were many circumstances, certainly, in the young man's favor, and some to be supposed. Possibly Arrius knew Valerius Gratus without loving him. Possibly he had known the elder Hur. In the course of his appeal, Judah had asked him of that, and, as will be noticed, he had made no reply. For once the tribune was at loss and hesitated. His power was ample. He was monarch of the ship. His prepossessions all moved him to mercy. His faith was won. Yet he said to himself there was no haste, or rather there was haste to Cythera. The best rower could not then be spared. He could wait. He would learn more. He would at least be sure this was the prince Ben-Hur, and that he was of a right disposition. Ordinarily slaves were liars. It is enough, he said aloud. Go back to thy place. Ben-Hur bowed, looked once more into the master's face, but saw nothing for hope. He turned away slowly, looked back, and said, If thou dost think of me again, O tribune, let it not be lost in thy mind that I prayed thee only for word of my people, mother, sister. He moved on. Arrius followed him with admiring eyes. Perpole, he thought, with teaching, what a man for the arena, what a runner, ye gods, what an arm for the sword or the cestus. Stay, he said aloud. Ben-Hur stopped, and the tribune went to him. If thou wert free, what wouldst thou do? The noble Arrius mocks me, Judas said with trembling lips. No, by the gods, no. Then I will answer gladly. I would give myself to duty, the first of life. I would know to other. I would know to rest until my mother and Tirzah were restored to home. I would give every day and hour to their happiness. I would wait upon them, never a slave more faithful. They have lost much, but by the God of my fathers, I would find them more. The answer was unexpected by the Roman. For a moment he lost his purpose. I spoke to thy ambition, he said, recovering. If thy mother and sister were dead, or not to be found, what wouldst thou do? A distinct pallor overspread Ben-Hur's face, and he looked over the sea. There was a struggle with some strong feeling. When it was conquered, he turned to the tribune. What pursuit would I follow? He asked. Yes, Tribune, I will tell thee truly. Only the night before the dreadful first day which I have spoken, I obtained permission to be a soldier. I am of the same mind yet, and as in all the earth there is but one school of war, thither would I go. The Palestra? Exclaimed Arrius. No, a Roman camp. But thou must first acquaint thyself with the use of arms. Now a master may never safely advise a slave. Arrius saw his indiscretion, and, in a breath, chilled his voice and manner. Go now, he said, and do not build upon what has passed between us. Perhaps I do but play with thee, or, he looked away musingly, or, if thou dost think of it with any hope, choose between the renown of a gladiator and the service of a soldier. The former may come of the favor of the emperor. There is no reward for thee in the latter. Thou art not a Roman. Go. A short while after Ben-Hur was upon his bench again. A short while after, Ben-Hur was on his bench again. There should be a comma there. But Lew Wallace doesn't believe in commas, so that's what it is. A man's task is always light if his heart is light. Handling the oar did not seem so toilsome to Judah. A hope had come to him like a singing bird. He could hardly see the visitor or hear its song. That it was there, though he knew, his feelings told him so. The caution of the tribune, perhaps I do but play with thee, was dismissed often as it recurred to his mind. That he had been called by the great man and asked his story was the bread upon which he fed his hungry spirit. Surely something good would come of it. The light about his bench was clear and bright with promises, and he prayed, O God, I am a true son of the Israel thou hast so loved. Help me, I pray thee. Chapter 4 is called Number 60. Okay, yeah, we've got it. Let me see how much further this book goes, because I see there's a... All right, so I think we'll read chapter 4, and tomorrow we read 5 and 6, and then we finish book 3. So books 2 and 3 are kind of short-ish. Still lots of details. Chapter 4, number 60. In the bay of Antemona, east of Cythera, the island, the 100 galleys assembled. There the tribune gave 1 day to inspection. He sailed then to Naxos, the largest of the Cyclades, midway the coast of Greece and Asia, like a great stone planted in the center of a highway, from which he could challenge everything that passed. At the same time, he would be in position to go after the pirates instantly, whether they were in the Aegean or out on the Mediterranean. As the fleet in order rowed in toward the mountain shores of the island, a galley was coming from the north. Arrius went to meet it. She proved to be a transport just from Byzantium, and from her commander he learned the particulars of which he stood in most need. The pirates were from all the farther shores of the Euxine, even Tanais at the mouth of the river, which was supposed to feed Palus Meotis, was represented among them. Their preparations had been with the greatest secrecy. The first known of them was their appearance of the entrance of the Thracian Bosphorus, followed by the destruction of the fleet in station there. Thence to the outlet of the Hellespont everything afloat had fallen their prey. There were quite 60 galleys in the squadron, all well manned and supplied. A few were biremes, the rest stout triremes. A Greek was in command, and the pilots, said to be familiar with all the eastern seas, were Greek. The plunder had been incalculable. The panic, consequently, was not on the sea alone. Cities, with closed gates, sent their people nightly to the walls. Traffic had almost ceased. Where were the pirates now? To this question of most interest to Arrius, he received answer. After sacking Hephaestia on the island of Lemnos, the enemy had coursed across to the Thessalian group, and by last account disappeared in the gulfs between Euboea and Hellas. Such were the tidings. Then the people of the island, drawn to the hilltops by the rare spectacle of 100 ships careering in united squadron, beheld the advanced division suddenly turn to the north, and follow, wheeling upon the same point like cavalry. Sorry. Let me start that sentence over. Then the people of the island, drawn to the hilltops by the rare spectacle of 100 ships careering in united squadron, beheld the advance division suddenly turn to the north, and the others follow, wheeling upon the same point like cavalry in a column. News of the piratical descent had reached them, and now, watching the white sails until they faded from sight up between the Rhine and the Syros, the thoughtful among them took comfort and were grateful. What Rome seized with strong hand she always defended. In return for their taxes she gave them safety. The tribune was more than pleased with the enemy's movements. He was doubly thankful to fortune. She had brought swift and sure intelligence, and had lured his foes into the waters where of all others destruction was most assured. He knew the havoc one galley could play in the broad sea like the Mediterranean, and the difficulty of finding and overhauling her. He knew also how these very circumstances would enhance the service and glory if, at one blow, he could put a finish to the whole piratical array. If the reader will take a map of Greece and the Aegean, he will notice the island of Euboea lying along the classic coast like a rampart against Asia, leaving a channel between it and the continent, quite 120 miles in length and scarcely an average of height and width. The inlet on the north had admitted the fleet of Xerxes, and now it received the bold raiders from the Euxine. The towns along the Pelagic and Malaic gulfs were rich and their plunder seductive. All things considered, therefore, Arrius judged that the robbers might be found somewhere below Thermopylae. Welcoming the chance, he resolved to enclose them north and south, to do which not an hour could be lost. Even the fruits and wines and women of Naxos must be left behind. So he sailed away without stop or tack, until a little before nightfall Mount Ochre was seen upreared against the sky, and the pilot reported the Euborian coast. Is everybody okay? What are we doing? Kim, what are you doing? Okay. Sorry. At a signal, the fleet rested upon its oars. When the movement was resumed, Arrius led a division of 50 of the galleys, intending to take them up the channel, while another division, equally strong, turned their prows to the outer or seaward side of the island, with orders to make all haste to the upper inlet and descend, sweeping the waters. Excuse me. To be sure, neither division was equal in number to the pirates, but each had advantages in compensation among them, by no means least discipline impossible to the lawless horde, however brave. Besides, it was a shrewd count on the tribune's side. If peradventure one should be defeated, the other would find the enemy shattered by his victory, and in condition to be easily overwhelmed. Meantime, Ben-Hur kept his bench, relieved every 6 hours. The rest in the bay of Antemona had refreshed him, so that the oar was not troublesome, and the chief on the platform found no fault. Oh, we do have a comment now. Granny Bear has been here, and I don't think she's still here, but she left. She will watch later, probably. People generally are not aware of the ease of mind there is in knowing where they are and where they are going. The sensation of being lost is a keen distress. Still worse is the feeling one has in driving blindly into unknown places. Custom had dulled the feeling with Ben-Hur, but only measurably. Pulling away hour after hour, sometimes days and nights together, sensible all the time that the galley was gliding swiftly along some of the many tracks of the broad sea. The longing to know where he was and whither going was always present with him, but now it seemed quickened by the hope which had come to a new life in his breast since the interview with the tribune. The narrower the abiding place happens to be, the more intense is the longing. And so he found. He seemed to hear every sound of the ship in labor, and listen to each one as if it were a voice come to tell him something. He looked to the grating overhead, and threw it into the light of which so small a portion was his, expecting he knew not what, and many times he caught himself on the point of yielding to the impulse to speak to the chief on the platform, than which no circumstance of battle would have astonished that dignitary more. In his long service, by watching the shifting of the meager sunbeams upon the cabin floor when the ship was under way, he had come to know, generally, the quarter into which she was sailing. This, of course, was only of clear days like those good fortune was sending the Tribune. The experience had not failed him in the period succeeding the departure from Cythera. Thinking they were tending toward the old Judean country, he was sensitive to every variation from the course. With a pang he had observed the sudden change northward, which, as has been noticed, took place near Naxos. The cause, however, he could not even conjecture, for it must be remembered that in common with his fellow slaves, he knew nothing of the situation and had no interest in the voyage. His place was at the oar, and he was held there inexorably, whether at anchor or under sail. Once only in 3 years had he been permitted an outlook from the deck. The occasion we have seen. He had no idea that, following the vessel he was helping drive, there was a great squadron close at hand and in beautiful order. No more did he know the object with which it was in pursuit. When the sun, going down, withdrew his last ray from the cabin, the galley still held northward. Night fell, yet Ben-Hur could discern no change. About that time, the smell of incense floated down the gangways from the deck. The tribune is at the altar, he thought. Can it be we are going into battle? He became observant. Now he had been in many battles without having seen one. From his bench he had heard them above and about him until he was familiar with all their notes, almost as a singer with a song. So, too, he had become acquainted with many of the preliminaries of an engagement, of which, with a Roman as well as a Greek, the most invariable was the sacrifice to the gods. The rites were the same as those performed at the beginning of a voyage, and to him, when noticed, they were always an admonition. A battle, it should be observed, possessed for him and his fellow slaves of the oar an interest unlike that of the sailor and the marine. It came not of the danger encountered, but of the fact that defeat, if survived, might bring an alteration of condition, possibly freedom, at least a change of masters, which might be for the better. In good time the lanterns were lighted and hung by the stairs, and the tribune came down from the deck. At his word, the marines put on their armor. At his word again, the machines were looked to, and spears, javelins, and arrows in great sheaves brought and laid down upon the floor, together with jars of inflammable oil and baskets of cotton balls wound loose like the wicking of candles. And when, finally, Ben-Hur saw the tribune mount his platform and don his armor and get his helmet and shield out, the meaning of the preparations might not be any longer doubted, and he made ready for the last ignominy of his service. To every bench, as a fixture, there was a chain with heavy anklets. These the orator proceeded to lock upon the oarsmen, going from number to number, leaving no choice but to obey, and in event of disaster, no possibility of escape. In the cabin, then, a silence fell, broken at first only by the sough of the oars turning in the leathern cases. Every man upon the benches felt the shame, Ben-Hur more keenly than his companions. He would have put it away at any price. Soon the clanking of the fetters notified him of the progress the chief was making in his round. He would come to him in turn, but would not the tribune interpose for him? The thought may be set down to vanity or selfishness, as the reader pleases. It certainly, at that moment, took possession of Ben-Hur. He believed the Roman would interpose. Anyhow, the circumstance would test the man's feelings. If, intent upon the battle, he would but think of him, it would be proof of his opinion formed, proof that he had been tacitly promoted above his associates in misery, such proof as would justify hope. Ben-Hur waited anxiously. The interval seemed like an age. At every turn of the oar he looked towards the tribune, who, his simple preparations made, lay down upon the couch and composed himself to rest, whereupon number 60 chid himself and laughed grimly and resolved not to look that way again. The orator approached. Now he was at number 1. The rattle of the iron links sounded horribly. At last, number 60. Calm from despair, Ben-Hur held his oar at poise and gave his foot to the officer. Then the tribune stirred, sat up, beckoned to the chief. A strong revulsion seized the Jew. From the orator, the great man glanced at him, and when he dropped his oar, all the section of the ship on his side seemed aglow. He heard nothing of what was said, enough that the chain hung idly from its staple in the bench, and that the chief, going to his seat, began to beat the sounding board. The notes of the gavel were never so like music. With his breast against the leaded handle, he pushed with all his might, pushed until the shaft bent as if about to break. The chief went to the tribune and, smiling, pointed to number 60. "What strength!" he said. "And what spirit!" the tribune answered. "Propole! He is better without the irons. Put them on him no more." So saying, he stretched himself upon the couch again. The ship sailed on hour after hour under the oars in water scarcely rippled by the wind, and the people not on duty slept, Arrius in his place, the marines on the floor. Once, twice, Ben-Hur was relieved, but he could not sleep. 3 years of night, and through the darkness a sunbeam at last, at sea adrift and lost, and now land, dead so long, and lo, the thrill and stir of resurrection. Sleep was not for such an hour. Hope deals with the future. Now and the past are but servants, the weight on her with impulse and suggestive circumstance. Starting from the favor of the tribune, she carried him forward indefinitely. The wonder is not that things so purely imaginative as the results she points us to can make us so happy, but that we can receive them as so real. They must be as gorgeous poppies under the influence of which, under the crimson and purple and gold, reason lies down the while and is not. Sorrows assuaged, home and the fortunes of his house restored, mother and sister in his arms once more. Such were the central ideas which made him happier that moment than he had ever been. That he was rushing, as on wings, into horrible battle had, for the time, nothing to do with his thoughts. The things thus in hope were unmixed with doubts. They were. Hence his joy so full, so perfect, there was no room in his heart for revenge. Messala, Gratus, Rome, and all the bitter, passionate memories connected with them were as dead plagues, miasms of the earth above which he floated, far and safe, listening to singing stars. The deeper darkness before the dawn was upon the waters, and all things going with the with the ship, Astroa, when a man descending from the deck walked swiftly to the platform where the tribune slept and awoke him. Arrius arose, put on his helmet, sword, and shield, and went to the commander of the marines. "The pirates are close by. Up and ready," he said, and passed to the stairs, calm, confident, in so much that one might have thought, "Happy fellow, Apicius has sent a feast for him." And so that is the end of chapter 4. And we will begin chapter 5 tomorrow and read chapters 5 and 6, which will conclude book 3. Book 4 is much longer. I can tell just from if you look at the pages on you probably can't see it on the live stream, but you can see a little bit discolored pages, and that's the beginning of each book. And so you can kind of tell that book 4 and 5 and 8 are much bigger. 6 and 7 are going to be shorter, and you can just kind of tell that from looking at the pages of the book. Anyway, so Mr. Judah there is still on the galley, but he's not in the shackles, and he's dreaming about freedom. And I hope that you have a good night, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. I'm going to be, a word about YouTube. I have been posting these. I will be posting this one immediately after we finish the live stream. I've gotten a lot of views recently on YouTube, including the last Ben-Hur chapter actually has 3 views already, and it's been less than 48 hours. So that's telling me that people are watching this. So I'm really pleased. I hope that this isn't wasted, and that it's not wasted because I'm reading to my kids. And the purpose of this is reading to Kimberly and JJ and Daniel, who isn't here right now, but that's a long story that I don't need to go into on this platform, and Rebecca and Ben when he watches. So, and I'm really glad that Granny Bear gets to tune in, and I'm really glad that some other people have been tuning in on other platforms such as YouTube. So I really do appreciate you watching. Please, please, please hit a like button. Make a comment. Let me know that you're there. Let me know what you think of the reading, and what you think of that particular chapter, whether or not maybe it's too much detail or whatever. It's fine. You know, I can take it. I didn't write it. Lew Wallace wrote it. So when I'm reading my book that I'm writing right now, which I haven't settled on the name of it, so I can't for sure tell you what it's called at this point. But when I'm reading my book, then you can minimize the comments about, well, I don't like this section, I don't like this section, you know. I'm just joking. So anyway, so with all that being said, and a lot of rambling, because that's what I do for a living. Well, not for a living, but it is what I do. I will bid you adieu. And I hope that you have a wonderful night. God bless you. And we will see you again tomorrow when we read another story. Well, the same story, but another chapter. All right. God bless.